moved there.
Up in Chimney Rock.
We used to go to Chimney Rock.
I mean, they're right next door to the medallion, which
is all part of the same
complex. Because we brought our Sunday school kids there.
Okay. Right. So what I want to speak about today is I titled it "The Jewish Spiral of Time." Okay, and you'll see why we are calling it the spiral in a second. So before we begin, okay, if I had to ask you to illustrate to me a mathematical symbol to represent God, what symbol would that be?
Infinity.
Infinity. Okay, we're gonna write that down. Okay, all right, infinity. Okay, now those of you who are mathematically inclined, if I write an equation of infinity plus 1 with an equal sign, right? I know I discussed this concept maybe with you in the past, but we're going to head somewhere with this. So infinity plus 1, what would be the answer in mathematical terms?
Still infinity.
It would still be infinity, okay? Now, why is that? So conceptually, the reason is because infinity by definition means there is no limitation. There's no border. Infinity means always, everywhere, all the time. And the second you include a finiteness, when there exists an infinity, you're off. There's something that doesn't work in that equation. And therefore, the correct mathematical term to define infinity plus 1, 1 being finiteness, infinity being infiniteness, infinity, the correct result is infinity. Okay, now why am I telling you this? Because the Jewish belief system given to us in the Torah and highlighted in Maimonides tells us that the way we ought to relate to God, because we are limited as finite beings in our ability to relate to God, we are finite. Maimonides describes God as being the Ein Sof. Those of you that know Hebrew, Ein Sof literally means no end. We ought to relate to God as the no end. The modern mathematical equivalent of no end is the word infinity. So if I write above the infinity symbol, I'm going to write the Hebrew Hey, which is the way we usually write Hashem. Whenever we write Hashem, we have a Hebrew Hey. So if I substitute the infinity symbol with Hashem, and for the number 1, I write an F for finite, meaning anything finite. What should be my answer? There should only be Hey. There should only be Hashem. So in a theological equation, our existence should not be possible. Okay? Because if you agree with me that there can be no finiteness when added to infinity, okay? And I don't mean to confuse you all in this discussion, but if there can be no finiteness when added to infinity, then how are we, right? I can feel him, right? I can hear you, I can see you. If I can feel, hear, see, touch you, you take up space, you are finite. You have a beginning, you have an end, you have a creator. And that creator has a purpose.
But that's the difference between us and God.
Well,
God's infinite, we're not.
Yeah, but we have a physical being, which is a vessel, but our soul is continuous.
Good. Okay. So he's been going around the Wolbe's class.
Objects exist within infinity. Finite objects exist within infinity.
That is the question. How can finite objects exist within infinity? Infinity means at any given time, there's no limitation. There is no time. There is no time. Right? Look, how would you describe finiteness in math? You would put a bar, you would limit the bar, and then you might put a point on the bar. Okay?
If 2 lines are parallel.
Can this exist in math, Ed? Okay? A bar with 2 arrows and a point. Can this exist?
Yeah.
No.
What do you mean? I don't understand.
Meaning, okay, if this is an infinite, if this is a line representing infinity, right? There's a problem with the existence of this point because there can be no limitation in infinity. This point is giving dimension to a dimensionless idea. There can be no beginning end trait of finiteness if there is an infinity.
Okay, if you have 2 parallel lines, the definition of parallel line is they never meet. So
time is the 4th dimension.
The parallelness is infinite. Yet along these 2 parallel lines, you can have objects. You can have say the two streets that are parallel. And you just go on forever.
Yeah.
Because they never meet.
Yeah.
But you can have houses along these streets.
Okay.
Yeah.
But those streets themselves are finite. They're not infinite.
Well, maybe they are infinite if they
Yes.
just go on.
Well,
That's right.
a line is finite. Take a circle.
Okay.
Okay, I was going to say,
Yeah, but when
if
it's
they go around,
finite,
if they go
it's
around the
the
globe,
fourth dimension, so that's
Well,
why it would be
Well, hold on.
confused.
Take a circle. There's no beginning or end.
So the question that every religion has been dealing with since the beginning has been, how do we logically, as finite beings, connect to this tradition that's been passed down to us, that there is a God and that God is infinite, yet we are finite. It shouldn't be possible for a finiteness and an infinity to coexist.
Why? I don't get it.
I'll explain it again.
No.
You don't get it either?
No.
Okay.
I
Well,
do too.
okay.
I'll accept it.
Okay, you don't accept it. Okay. So I'll try one last time. But the reason why,
It's too bad Leon isn't here.
which Leon?
That Russian guy. He's a math
Okay.
professor.
Well, okay, let me ask
He would support me here.
Let me ask this question.
I know Leon.
If the soul is continuous and we have a soul inside,
We're getting there.
all right.
We're getting to the soul.
So, and if you look at pantheism, where once you strip away everything, we're all a form of God. Okay, and we all have God within. Then, yeah, our physical vessels are finite, but the rest of us internal.
That doesn't, but you're right. Everything you're saying is correct, and we are getting there. We're going to be talking a lot more about that. But what you said doesn't negate the existence of finiteness.
Oh, absolutely not.
Right. And the question is based on our agreement that we are, in fact, all finite. Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
So if we can agree that we are all finite, do you know what finite means?
Our physical
Right?
beings may be finite, but our souls may.
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct. But that doesn't take away from the question. Because even if we have some, which we do, we have a neshama within us, right? We are finite. Is there a God? And if there is a God, and that God is infinite, where is there an ability for a dimension?
Okay, we actually discussed something. I guess it's related to this the other night. We were talking that time does not exist for God. That's
Right.
Correct.
That's
For
why.
God.
That's why he knows everything that's going on in the future, everything in the past, and everything now.
Oh, my
He really
God.
does not exist
No,
in time.
it's too complicated.
So, I guess not existing in time is related to his being infinite.
Anybody see the movie Interstellar?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a movie that you ought to see if this kind of subject interests you. It's called Interstellar. Okay. And somebody recommended it to me last year. And it's just fascinating. It brings on a lot of these ideas and it puts them into a really cool, dramatic movie where humans are trying to escape Earth to find alternative life because Earth is dying and they're looking for different planets and they're cheating time. It's very interesting. Okay, either way,
You ought to
what
do
I'm
that
trying
next
to...
week Consider that bobsled movie.
Oh, Cool Runnings? Yeah, you're all invited next week. Okay, let's focus.
Okay, but what you're saying, then, like, also sort of, I was with Ed in that discussion, and you have God. God is, of course, outside of time stream. He has to be because he's infinite. He's omnipotent. So he doesn't actually need any references to time because he's above it, doesn't need it. So to answer your question, I think he made it for us, human beings, so that we have a reference of some sort.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the answer. Okay? The answer is, just because we want to get somewhere here, the answer is, in a nutshell, and this is a Kabbalistic idea, is that God did something which in Hebrew is called tzimtzum. Has anybody ever heard of tzimtzum?
Yes.
Yeah.
Tzimtzum in English can be most easily literally translated as contraction. Okay? What that means is, obviously we know God can do anything. One of the incredible things that God did was create a space, okay, in which finiteness could exist. And it was in that space that our universe is found. Why did God do it? Let me ask you a question. Is God limitless?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, check.
Yes.
Okay, limitless,
We gotta-
check.
we gotta check.
Okay. Question number 2. Is God lacking nothing?
Yes.
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 Okay. Check. Now let me ask you a question. Let's agree that there's 2 reasons, 2 possible reasons why God created the world. It was, and you can argue with me on this, but I'm going to say A and B. A is for God. B, for man, i.e. creation. Okay? That could be the only reason. The problem is that you all agreed with me that God is limitless and lacking nothing. I'm going to focus on lacking nothing, okay? If God is lacking nothing, what was the purpose of creating the world? And if the purpose was for God or the purpose is for man, we're going to have issues with both of those reasons.
He needed some excitement in his life.
God needed some excitement.
No, by the
You're
definition.
exploring in eternity. You need something.
What you have presented in Aristotle's 13 logic flaws is commonly known as being on the horns of a faulty dilemma. There's no.
Okay, fine. I still have the same question on those 2, though. You're making a valid point. Bruce?
Yes.
Bruce, that is a valid point. Why do I have an issue with A and B? Very, very simple. Are you following, Pascal?
No, it's not. I'm thinking.
Okay,
No,
okay,
it's not.
All right, I feel like I'm disturbing
Give
her
the
in this
question
conversation.
French.
What?
Give the question French.
Okay. Peut-être
No,
qu'on va-
it's just I'm thinking because we live in 4 dimensions. We've got, we've got the X, the Y, the Z, and the time. So maybe what you're trying to say is that there's another dimension. That's what I want to know
Okay.
because
Well,
Absolutely.
we are definitely heading. Pascal,
a 5th
Pascal,
dimension.
No,
we
they
are-
were- they were
we are
amusing.
definitely.
Huh?
They were a group in the 70s.
Wait, it's called the 5th dimension.
Yeah. You didn't know that?
Have any of you ever played virtual reality? It's the new buzz now among millennials and younger kids. I haven't done it yet, but apparently they have now the technology where you can,
Yeah.
with a very powerful computer and special goggles, you can create a world
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah.
that
Yeah,
you
yeah.
that you
Google-
interact
I've
with.
Yeah. Google's
Like Avatar.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I want to try it. I'm excited to try it. I think it's a little
Is that like
expensive.
Avatar.
Yeah, something
Yeah,
like that.
Avatar's
Something like
version.
that. Okay, here's the problem: is that if God is lacking nothing, then what did the creation add to God's exist? Like, what was the point? God was lacking nothing. He didn't need to create it for God. God was, by definition, perfectly fine and limitless and lacking nothing before the creation. And B, was it for us? Well, God was fine before us. Don't create us and you won't have a problem. Thank you for playing our game. I'm sorry. All right. Right? So I did that for you.
But it's almost self-evident. It's almost self-evident that God does nothing without a purpose.
Bruce is my man.
And consequently, him choosing to create the world for us to learn in, it serves a purpose that we may or may not be able to access because of our limited abilities.
Okay, so I am making a mental note to tell Rabbi Wolbe that the students of the Lunch and Learn are just as capable and, in fact, extremely talented and able to give the class because you guys are all preempting every point that I hope to make in this class. So that is that is the answer, okay? The answer is like this, is that God, in God's entirety, is eternal, okay, and perfect. God also has attributes. And those attributes are also eternal and also perfect. Now, great. Rabbi, those words sound good, but what does it actually mean? What that means is that the same attributes that we deal in, right? Only the good ones, because God is good. That's another central belief in Maimonides, okay? All the good qualities that we interact with in life, in ourselves and in our friends, the good ones are qualities that God has. The only difference is that in God, they are the ultimate of that quality. So for example, and the one I want to focus on the most in today's class is the attribute of goodness. When I do good for someone, it could be good even if I have ulterior motives, but that's not the greatest good. Now, I am, as a human being, able to express a real, genuine good, but even the most genuine human good is still somewhat tainted just by virtue of the fact that it's finite, that it's human, right? Yes.
Rabbi, you talked about Tzimtzum.
Yes.
So what has Tzimtzum got to do with...
Tzimtzum was giving us a framework to understand the ABCs of how we could be existing if there is an infinity. Infinity being God. And the very first point, before we begin to talk anything, we need to understand how we exist in this, like you said, fourth dimension or fifth dimension. The answer is very simply that we shouldn't be able to, by logic. God did us a kindness and created a space in the infinity for us to exist. That contraction is called tzimtzum. The next question, therefore, is, okay, it's great that God did that. Why did God do that? And that's where we are at right now.
And that's a good question, because since we're imperfect and God is perfect,
Yeah,
why have imperfection around?
exactly. So that's where we are at now. Now we understand that there is a God. We understand that that God is infinite. We understand that we are finite. We understand that the way God made that possible is by creating a space, a contraction, a tzimtzum. But now what? Why? Was it for God? Was it for man? Both of those are problematic because God was fine before those. And the answer is, like we were just saying now, there are godly, eternal, perfect attributes. And the most important one, at least for our purposes, is the attribute of goodness.
I mean,
All
God
right.
created the world for our pleasure. So
But the question, though, would remain, because why does God need our pleasure? God is lacking nothing.
I disagree with you most respectfully. When you read Torah, and I've thought about this for a long time, let me tell you this. When you read Torah, God's first commandment to us isn't go forth and have pleasure. Bacchus. It's not his commandment to us. The very first thing that happens in the story of the creation, other than creating the stage itself, earth and all the many players, is that God brings all of the animals forward to Adam and tells Adam to give each one a name. Okay. For those of y'all who are familiar with the scientific method, basically he has just said categorize and logically deduce the reason for all this variation. To me, what this says is, because the most important story of every culture is always the first story told. You don't wait until the end or halfway through it to introduce the big idea. The big idea is always the first idea. So the first idea presented in Judaism is that we are here to learn. And God taught us the way that we're supposed to learn. Observe for yourself, categorize, and then make a deduction. It's not good for man to be alone. There are none like me here.
I agree completely with you.
So to me, the purpose of life is it's a big school. And we're students.
But
Yeah.
why? But again, that doesn't.
But
answer the question.
that doesn't
Why?
yet, right.
Because God knows, God having created us as limited, finite beings, okay, with an eternal portion, knows that we have limitations on how we are capable of learning. So he has created this method.
No, but why
us.
create us in the first place?
Right.
Well, that you'll have to ask.
Oh,
him.
okay. So
I only assume.
Yeah, no, but
that it was for
everything you
this
said is
purpose.
correct, but it's
Yeah.
after the given of why we were created. And so,
This is the great question for which we will never have an answer.
well, I'm actually going to share with you a perspective. So
Okay.
not
this-
an answer, but a perspective.
So this perspective is also all of this information can be found in Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzato's famous book called Derech Hashem, The Way of God. This is the same author who wrote the famous Mesilat Yesharim, The Path of the Just. So if you ever want to involve yourself in this kind of philosophical, theological talk, that's the address. That is the book, okay? And he
What's
basically,
his short name?
Rabbi Moshe Ramchal. Okay, the Ramchal. That's the Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lutzato, Ramchal. So he says like this. Let's say Bruce is an extremely generous individual. There's only one problem. In his entire life, not one person has ever actually experienced or seen or felt that generosity, and he has never exhibited it. Would you agree with me that his generosity is not a truth until it is manifested? Are you hearing the question? I will repeat. Let's say Pascal, I want to make sure she's with me because I want Pascal to understand, right? Let's say Pascal is a very kind person, and we all know that to be true. Very sweet lady. Let's say Pascal has never exhibited kindness at all in her life. Can she still be categorized and titled as being a kind person if no one's ever felt it and she's never exhibited it? No. But that's not real. It's potential. It's not real until it's manifest.
Well, yeah, because perception.
Correct. So Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto says that God also has attributes, and those attributes are the greatest possible. They're infinite, they're perfect. One of those attributes is goodness. The law of attributes stipulates that the truth in the attribute is made inherent when manifest. Therefore, the manifestation of the truth of God's eternal element of goodness was the creation of the world. I will repeat.
Yeah.
The creation of the world was the natural manifestation of the attribute of eternal ultimate goodness within God.
At least for us.
Yes.
Because without the creation of the world, we wouldn't be here to experience the manifestation of all of these.
Exactly.
But the only problem was there was no us when he created the world.
What about...
He did it for us, and then he created us so that we could do it.
Now, yes, go ahead.
What about humility, all the traits?
We're getting there. We're getting there right now, okay? So that's exactly where we're going, okay? Because imagine if God had created a world without human beings. Would that be a happy world, a sad world, a weird world?
It would make no difference. Without human beings, it would serve no purpose.
Okay. So we understand that of all creations, it is clear that mankind, womankind, peoplekind, as Prime Minister Trudeau would like to say, of Canada, not to get political here, okay? But we understand that we are the most enlightened of creations. We are the only creations that have the ability to make conscious, free will decisions that go counter to our baser physical instinct. I can choose to not eat for 2 days if I really, really want to, or if I religiously believe in it. Let's say you have Yom Kippur and whatever. Or I can choose to not be physically intimate with a woman who I find attractive just because, right? Animals don't have that. Okay, some animals might in some sense, but they don't have the same faculties. They don't have actual free will. You put a hungry lion in front of a fat, juicy zebra, that zebra's days are numbered. Okay, you put a couple female animals in front of a male animal of the same species during the mating season, something's gonna go down. You know what I'm saying? Right. Okay. You get the idea, right? So with human beings, unfortunately, there are human beings who do behave animalistically, and they are gonna. But the difference is they're gonna have to answer to a higher authority because they can't give an excuse to God after 120 years that I was reacting on instinct. No, my son. I created you, and I know you. And I know, remind me your first name again? Howie. And I know, like Howie said, that I created you with the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer HaTov. I created you with body and soul. And your entire life, you had a choice to make. Were you going to make the B, the master over the S, meaning the body, master over the soul? Or were you going to make the soul the master over the body? And when you decided to do whatever sin you did, if it's that pig you ate, or if it's that girl you were with, or if it's that whatever it is that you did, you made a conscious decision. You can say whatever you want. You made a conscious decision to put your body over the soul. And so, what are we in this world for? God didn't create animals. He created animals. He created trees, but he created them for us. The world was created for us. We are obligated, especially as Jews, to believe that Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam. Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam means that the world was created for me. That's not an egotistical thing. That's an elevated concept. That's a concept that says that I am here to better myself and the world around me. Otherwise, if I'm just an animal, let me do whatever the heck I want. Let me eat whatever I want. Let me say whatever I want. Let me take a life. Let me be intimate with whoever I want. No. I created you with the ability to earn your own existence. And that line is key because people view the burden of having a Yetzer Hara, the burden of not being allowed to do whatever you physically want to do. People view that as an evil. People sometimes view that as cumbersome, as burdensome, as wrong, as inhibiting, and it's awful. But what they don't realize is that this battle of free will is really the cherry on top of the cake of goodness. You see, God not only created a world where we can interact with each other, like Bruce said, like we have a delicious food at our availability, beautiful families, a gorgeous torch center, nice weather outside, Shabbat, but we also have the ability to earn it. We have the ability to be making free will decisions and tell God, hey, look what I have to show for myself. But guess who gave us the ability to show for ourselves? Hashem. That is the greatest goodness, and it was the creation of us, the world and us, that was the natural manifestation of that goodness. That is part A of this class. Any questions? Now.
Yeah, but Rabbi, it also goes back to
I was so close.
It's like a mafia statement. It's like, they just pulled me back in.
All right, so what's your question?
Is that, like you were saying before you ended your statement, that, okay, so if you have an idea, or it's in the theology or whatever, but when you actually bring it out into an action, a physical action, whether it's good or bad, then that's also godlike, because you're now taking
100%. No, never will you hear me or any rabbi say that one cannot elevate themselves spiritually using the body. That's what I meant when I said that we ought to be making the soul the master of the body. Making the soul master of the body means using the body to do the will of the soul. So I am getting myself out of bed to come hear Torah. I am moving myself to the sink so that I can make a blessing and then appreciate God for the pizza and not just eat it like any animal would eat their food. Okay? So on and so forth. Every decision we make, where it's like anybody used to see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Okay? So one of the bad guys in that movie is Shredder. There's another bad guy who's this like alien that lives in this like bot. It's like a robot, and you have this little alien pulling levers, okay? So imagine your life as like you have an internal neshama that's got the controls for your physical body, and how is your internal neshama, okay, reacting and interacting with the body, okay? And this, by the way, explains why I've said this before, why we tear our clothing when someone close to us dies, right? Is, we're not allowed to tear our flesh in Judaism. You're not allowed to intentionally pull out your hair, cut yourself. All of that is forbidden in Judaism. On the other hand, you're obligated to tear garments. Why do we tear garments when someone passes away? What does that have to do with anything? I need to tear my garments in order to feel grief for someone? So the answer is it's a symbolic way of being comforted. People don't know this, is that when I am tearing a garment, I am actually reminding myself that the individual in his or her entirety is not gone. It is merely the clothing that is gone. It is merely the surface that is gone. The actual individual is still very much alive. The individual is not the body. The individual is the soul, right? That's why Adam and Eve, right, before they sinned by eating from the tree, they were naked. And we don't hear anything about their nakedness until they sin. But once they sin, the Torah says, and Adam and Eve recognized their nakedness. Hello? Where have you been? Were you oblivious to your own nakedness these past couple of hours? Right? Because the sages say that the sin happens pretty close to the actual moment of creation. What happened? What caused them to all of a sudden recognize their nakedness? And the answer is that while they were still pre the sin of the tree, their self-identity was one of complete spirituality. And the external, what we now know to be the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, had yet to become an internal concept. It was external. And you know which shape it took, which manifestation it had? I'll give you a hint. It slithers. It's a snake. And after they ate from the tree, God cursed the snake, and the Yetzer Hara switched from being an external item to being an internal item. The greatest issue that we face throughout our lifetime, ever since that sin, way back in the times of Adam and Eve, the greatest dilemma we have is self-identification. The same question of body over soul or soul over body is this exact question. Am I my soul? Am I my body? Whether you realize it or not, when a person sins, when they're making a decision that goes counter to their better spiritual instinct, they are making a self-identification, aligning their identity with their body, not their soul, right? So that is the scoop. That is the scoop. Now here's the next question. Would you consider time to be finite or infinite?
Infinite.
Time is
Infinite.
merely
Okay, so we have some who are saying infinite and some who are saying finite. I want to hear both of you, please. Okay, so I heard Howie say infinite. Howie, explain why you think time is infinite.
Because there's no beginning and no end.
I would disagree on that.
Okay. Time continues.
Okay, does everybody agree to Howie that there's no beginning and no end to time?
No, I disagree.
Okay, I'll disagree. I won't disagree on the no end because the sages tell us that when Mashiach comes, we are all going to be reincarnated. We are all going to be leading lives of complete closeness to God, and the implication from the sources is that there will be no end, whatever that means. Again, it's one of those things that's very hard to comprehend. But no beginning, I would argue with, because this world is finite. Finiteness, by definition, necessitates beginning.
All right, yeah. If you want to talk about this world, then I'll agree that it's finite. But I'm
wait a second. But 1 second, Howie. Before this world, there was only God.
That's right.
And if God is infinite and infinity is beyond time, is outside of time, there is no concept of time by infinity.
Okay.
Then time began with our world.
Okay. All right. I'll go with that.
You go with that?
Yeah, I'll go with that. No, the perception of time. But it's
I'm
always
giving
been
up
there.
on
No,
your
no,
gun.
but it's
Okay.
always but it's always been there.
No, it hadn't.
No, even before this world was created, there was always something.
No,
There was God.
As a matter of fact,
Always
the
was.
source
God
is the
always
exact
was.
opposite.
There was
God
God.
always
was there,
Yeah.
but there was, tohu.
There was no beginning.
Tohu vavohu.
Yeah.
Vavohu. There was nothing there except confusion and disorganization.
That's right. But there was nothing there. But it goes all the way back.
Okay.
The definition is talking about a state where
But if you're talking about
there's
this
nobody to perceive it. If
Yeah.
time is a perception
Mhm.
and there's nobody to perceive it, then time doesn't exist.
That's what I'm saying. I agree with that. But I'm taking it like a step outside of that and going back and saying that there was no beginning because the creation of this world. Yeah, if you want to take that, which is finite, but it's always been here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's always been.
So it seems that now that we've convinced Howie, it seems that most of us are in agreement that time is finite. Okay? Now, if time is finite, how do we understand the holidays? And this is really what I was hoping to get to, is that we have Pesach coming up. We have Passover coming up. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And people often make the mistake of looking at these Jewish holidays and commemorating them as if they were simply historical events. So what happened on Rosh Hashanah? Adam was born. On Rosh Hashanah, we are celebrating the birth of Adam. Yom Kippur. What happened on Yom Kippur? Moses came down with the second set of tablets. We are commemorating Moses coming down with the second set of tablets. What happened on Passover? the Exodus, the Jews went out of Egypt. We're commemorating the Jews coming out of Egypt. But that is a big mistake.
Exactly.
That is a big
Purposes of
mistake.
festivals
Because all the
is to convert finite events into spiritual events.
Okay.
But is it also that Yom Kippur will always be either on a Saturday or Tuesday?
Well, the calendar might be set up that way. That is that we do have some days in the Jewish calendar that can only fall on certain weekdays.
But there's a reason for it.
Right. Could be. Yeah, there is a reason for it. Yes.
Okay,
I remember
what about when you're on Jupiter? What about when you're on Io?
It's funny. I got into a whole conversation with
No,
someone.
but it's all got to be with something that has been positive during those days, and maybe something.
You're so earthbound, my friend.
Yeah.
We have Jewish astronauts. Okay, when is Shabbos? When you're going around the Earth 28 times in a 24-hour period. Which day is Shabbos?
It's whatever time zone you're in at that moment.
Yeah, but
You're
don't
not
you?
in any time zone when you're in outer space.
Yes.
You're beyond it.
Don't you?
If
You're both
if
right.
you're above Houston, you're on Central Time.
The
Yeah,
rabbi
there
that
is a
the
sun.
rabbi
There's a
that
sun.
came to Rambam,
Yeah, there's
he
a
explained this. He said, and that's why I wanted to really understand that, is that there are some holidays that will always fall on Sunday, and on Tuesday, and on Thursday it will be something else.
Yeah.
Because of the creation, what was created on each day represents. That's what.
Right.
That's
Right.
what.
That's right.
But that changes if you, like he says, if you're on a different planet, like.
But are we?
Saturn,
If you
So,
change your planet,
I was at an
situation.
event. I was at an event 2 weeks ago, and any of you know Aaron Brown? Okay, so there is a guy.
That name.
Okay, Aaron Brown used to be the president of Torch, and he actually works with NASA. And so I knew that, and therefore, if you're a rabbi, you know that like the way to endear yourself with people is to find something that they are passionate about, and educate yourself about it, and develop the relationship based on that mutual knowledge. So I know my fair share about space and this discussion of how to be a Jew as an astronaut. I give a whole class on this, and I'd love to share some
There's
of
a
that
whole
with
book
you.
on this, by the way, written in the 1960s. It's a science fiction book called Wandering Stars, and all it is science fiction about Jews in outer space.
Wow.
Jeez.
I thought they
One of the most delightful books you will ever read in your life.
I thought at one time they made a decision that with the astronauts being up in outer space going around, that they would use Central Time because to be on the same clock as Houston.
If you're a religious Jew, you would use Jerusalem time.
No, well,
So this guy, he's got this like dream and idealism of like connecting Jews to Judaism through space exploration. And I was trying to explain to him that contrary to that idea, the laws of the Torah are clearly given to us from Earth's vantage point. And what that means is I gave a whole class of whether like Ilan Ramon went to space, he wanted to know, what does he do about Shabbat? Right? Now, there's a difference between whether you're on a plane in the Earth's atmosphere or you're in space. What you were saying, Ed, is true if you're on a plane. If you are on a plane, okay, traveling to any given country, and you want to, let's say, pray the morning prayers. Now, we all know you're really only supposed to pray the morning prayers or put on tefillin once it is sunrise. Now, the problem is when you're on a plane, you can see the light outside way, way earlier than the land beneath you. Now, the law is, just in a nutshell, so when you're on a plane, you follow the laws of the land beneath you, not space. A plane. When you're on a plane, you follow the laws of the land underneath you. So if you're traveling over Houston, you need to know what time it is and what sunrise is in Houston for you to know whether on the plane at that moment you can be putting on tefillin and praying. Space is different. Because which vantage point do you go from? Do you go directly up? What about a satellite that's revolving around the sun, right? Technically speaking, you can see a day a lot faster than you do on earth, right? So, in fact, there are rabbinical opinions that say that because mitzvah observance is impossible in space, that must mean, this is only one opinion, so don't get all nervous with me here, but that must mean that a Jewish observant Jew ought not, okay, go to space, because you're putting yourself in a situation where you are preventing yourself from properly keeping the mitzvot. There are many, many mitzvot. There are time-bound, and that time, he doesn't like it, and that time-bound component is from Earth's vantage point.
I see a difference between if you're going to Mars, you're not going around Earth, so yeah, you wouldn't be where you're above. But if you're in a satellite rotating around the Earth, even if you're in space, you can still line up with the ground underneath.
You're not on the Earth.
What if you're
which sunrise?
On the moon?
But you're still circling the Earth, so you're always in a place relative to a spot on Earth, which is different than if you're on a rocket ship to Mars. You're not
right
in a space.
What if you're on a base camp on the moon, where 24 hours a day you're either at night or you're at day, because the face of the moon never turns?
Yeah, but I'm not talking about being.
I'm asking you.
Okay, either way, I don't want to get caught off track. We have 10 minutes left, and I just wanted to show you.
Get your time makes out.
So, if I asked you to draw time, most of you would probably show me a line. Okay, and you would show me either an arrow, and you would show me maybe a beginning, and you would show me some points in this line that correspond to either days or weeks or months or years. You would draw this, okay? Now, Judaism tells us that unlike this model, time is much better illustrated as a
spiral.
As a spiral. Now, what's the significance of time being a spiral? So we spoke about how time is itself finite, and time is itself a creation. The rabbis tell us that at certain points in time, God created measures, seconds, right? Minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years. Now, in the year, I'm going to draw the year, okay? This is the year. Now, this is year 1, let's say. And here is going to be year 2018, okay? Or 5, 7, 7, 8 or 9? I think we're 8, right?
8.
Okay. Now, take a look at what I'm doing. I don't know if you can see, but I'll show you soon. So, God created moments of energy, okay, at specific days of the year, okay? So what I wrote here is a bar that represents the differential of time, and God created at certain unique days of time, from the beginning of time, different energies that can be accessed by God's creation to facilitate elevation. What do I mean by that? I'm going to do one last illustration and show you what I mean. So the first dot, we'll call it Rosh Hashanah, RH. The second dot, we're going to call it Yom Kippur, YK. The third dot, we're going to call it Sukkot, S. And the last one, we'll call it P, Pesach, even though there's a lot more, okay? Now watch what I'm about to do here, okay? I'm going to take my pen, I'm going to draw a line through the spiral on each point. All right?
And you have a musical scale.
Okay, now if this would be a lot better. This would work a lot better if I had, a ruler and I had a real equivalent spiral. But the point here is to show you that, take a look. I am cruising in my life through this spiral. So as I'm cruising here, look what I hit. I hit Rosh Hashanah. I hit the energy that is shooting out from creation on that day until the end of time on that spiral. What that means is that next year, I'm going to hit Rosh Hashanah again. And the year again. The next year, I'm going to hit Rosh Hashanah again. And the next year, I'm going to hit Rosh Hashanah again. Same thing with Yom Kippur. Look where Yom Kippur shows up. Yom Kippur shows up over here, right? Going to hit Yom Kippur again the next year. And hit Yom Kippur again the next year. I'm going to hit Yom Kippur again next year. Once you see it through this paradigm, the Jewish holidays The Jewish holidays are no longer simple commemorative events. But there is some truth to commemoration. Because the events that occurred on these days were the manifestation and the revelation of the energies that exist within. Meaning there was a purpose in Adam being born on Rosh Hashanah. There was a purpose in Moses coming down with the second set of tablets on Yom Kippur. There was a purpose for the Jews going out on Passover. It was to let us know that the energies of renewal on exist on Rosh Hashanah, that the energy of atonement, right? Moses coming down with the second tablets is arguably the greatest expression of atonement the world had ever seen. God was ready to abandon the Jewish people, but he atoned us. The revelation of the energy of atonement inherent in that day was the coming down of Sinai. And one last thing, and with Passover, freedom, liberation was the Exodus. And every year, as we as individuals and as a nation traverse this spiral, we are, right? I've been seeing too many movies, right? We are hitting, we are falling into that energy. And once we're in that 24-hour space, we have a tremendous, tremendous potential to achieve that energy. So on Rosh Hashanah, it's not just a day, it's a day where we start anew. Yom Kippur, it's not just a day, it's a day where we can literally cleanse our neshama, our soul, from all of its sins. Passover, same idea, personal liberation. I want to finish with a thought. You had a question.
Well, I was just still thinking that time can still be represented more concisely as a sphere, being that it only exists in the contraction within itself. And you can still illustrate the paradigm that you're showing as resonance that comes out within the sphere.
Okay. So I was also thinking as I drew this, that this works well with the theory of that the universe is moving and expanding. That would also make sense. But there's one thing I want to say, and this really touches. Yes.
But
yes.
I'm sorry.
That's confusing.
This is your
okay. This
the
is
time.
This is
time.
No. Time is the spiral.
Yeah.
Okay. The line represents the energy that God created every year on Rosh Hashanah.
Okay.
So God created a Rosh Hashanah energy, which is accessible every time you make it on there, on the spiral of time. Okay. If anybody wants
not every year.
It is every year.
But is this 1 year here? Then
1 year is a full revolution of the spiral.
Is a full revolution
Yeah.
of the
So there you go.
Now it makes sense.
You got it?
Now
Okay.
it makes
Now
sense.
you get it. Okay.
Okay.
Now I want to touch upon something that Bruce said, which is very applicable to what I want to say. He was saying how you said something like the beginning of something sets the tone. You said something like that a little bit 20 minutes ago. Now, that's true with us as well. Okay? In relationships, in business, in health, in everything in life, the beginning of something largely sets the tone for what the future holds. And take a look at an unborn child, a fetus, an embryo. It already has in it the DNA that's going to sustain it and provide all the information for its future continuity. A business, if you don't build a business or a synagogue or an organization on the right foundation, it's gonna disintegrate, isn't it? Right? Are you okay? Yeah. So the same is true with the Jewish people. Arguably, the vast majority, if not every nation, except for the Jews, became a nation on a common land, with a common culture, with a common language, etc., etc., etc. The Jewish people had none of that. Okay, I want to read you a quick. We had a language. Language we did have. I want to read you a quick section. Right?
Culture. Okay. And Judaism is a culture.
It's not a culture. It's a religion. It's not a culture. People confuse Jewish culture with Jewish religion. It's very, very different. There's a lot of people in Israel, for example, or even in America, who celebrate Jewish culture that have no clue what Shabbat is. They have no clue why Israel should be important to the Jewish people, right? So culture is a new thing in Judaism. It's not something, it's not, that's the way I perceive it.
We define culture differently.
Maybe.
Well, what you think of as Jewish culture is Ashkenazi, go to the delicatessen, this and that.
Talking about traditions.
Supporting of an entirely different culture.
No. To me, it's what we're doing right here. This is Jewish culture.
This is Jewish.
The greatest attribute, one of the greatest attributes of the Jewish people that separates us from everyone else is that we have basic ideas that came from the Torah, that came from the Talmud, that came from Tanakh, that came from Mishnah and Midrash, that it doesn't matter what language we learn them in, it doesn't matter where we are, it doesn't matter our age, it doesn't matter how much money or how little money we have. With these things, a Torah scholar is a prince, wherever he is. And an ignoramus, even if he's ruling a country, is an ignoramus. This is Jewish culture. It is the sum total of the knowledge and the wisdom that people transfer from one generation to another for continuity of culture.
I would simply substitute your word of culture in this entire paragraph that you just said with Torah, and I would say tradition over culture. The reason why I say that is because the way we as a society understand the modern word culture is not in line with Torah observance. There are so many Jews that identify with Jewish culture that are very, very not involved in what you've just described. Right? Yeah. That's what I'm trying to say. There's many Jews that celebrate their Jewishness and they celebrate Jewish culture without even knowing what kosher is, why Israel's important, what Shabbat is all about. Can I ask you a favor? There's a poster in that room that shows the descent. The triangle? Yeah, not the triangle, the other one that shows the different names. The transmission of Torah. If you have right,
it's a triangle.
Right, not the triangle. It's a different one. Right, that's a good one to illustrate what Bruce is describing.
If you look at it, like, if anybody went to see Y.Y. Jacobson a few weeks ago, he was great. He talked about the Jewish nation, okay, versus the Roman nation versus the Greeks and so forth, and basically bring it all down to is that you have traditions and everything, and you have different levels of knowledge of Judaism. All right, but the one thing that every Jew knows, they know Torah. Right, they may not know it in depth or whatever, but that centers them back to the nation.
Have you seen this before?
I can't see that far. I'm partially blind.
So what this is a paper that Rabbi Wolbe put together.
I can't see that far.
Okay,
Excuse
good.
me.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
So what he put this together, it's a list.
Oh, wonderful timeline.
It goes from down there and then back up here and then all the way to the bottom. And it just basically shows what you were describing as the continued transmission of Torah way back, all the way from God, all the way to us today. Either way, the point I want to say in a nutshell from this book is that what he says is that with all other nations, there is a spiritual connection between the nation and its identity and the land. And we've seen this in history. The Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the modern Germans, the French, people have, you could call it nationalism, you could call it patriotism, whatever you want to call it. There exists a spiritual bond between a nation and its land. So potent, so much so that should you take a nation and uproot it and exile it from its land, and this is also historically true, it will cease to exist as a nation. They won't be destroyed. They'll still survive and move on. But the nation as a unit and as an identity will cease to exist. Not so with only one people in the world. And that's what you were saying, right? We as a people, as much as we love Israel, and as much as Israel is our land, and God gave it to us, and there are a multitude of mitzvot and commandments that can only be kept in Israel. Right. And it is the place of linking Shamayim va'aretz. It is the place of connection between heaven and earth. That's why we pray towards the east. We want all of our prayers to head to Israel, and then to Jerusalem, and then to the temple, and then to the Holy of Holies, straight up to heaven. However, can we all agree that just the very fact that we are here together in Houston studying Torah at 1 p.m. is itself a proof, after 2,000 years of exile, that we are the exception to this rule, right? We are the only people that are able to be detached from our land and maintain our status, our identity as Jews. And we've done it, and we've done it many, many times. We long to go back to Israel. And that's why Moshe wanted primarily to go back. People think it was because, that it's a mistake people make today also. All this patriotism for Israel. The question is why? Why as a Jew do you love Israel so much? Is it because you want a country like all other countries? Is it just political in nature, right? Are you looking simply for good weather, for cool topography? Right? The Red Sea, the Dead Sea, the Golan, skiing on the Hermon. Those are all beautiful, wonderful things. But let's be real with ourselves. What's the true significance of Israel? The true significance of Israel is its capacity to help us elevate ourselves higher. There is an intrinsic holiness to that land which enables us, especially through the mitzvot that are only able to be performed there, to elevate ourselves on a much higher level. That's exactly why and only why Moses wanted to go there so much. Now, going back to our earlier definition, what are we celebrating on Pesach? On Pesach, we are celebrating the fact that the same way as a nation we were forged in unnatural circumstances, right? We were in a desert by this mountain. We didn't have our own land. We didn't have our own, culture. We didn't have our own, whatever you want to call it, right? It was all supernatural. It didn't make any sense. But the same way we said as a rule that the beginning of something sets the tone for the future, we are celebrating on Pesach that it wasn't just the beginning of the Jewish people that was supernatural in nature. It is the continuity, the present, and the future that is supernatural. We shouldn't be here today after everything our people have been through, right? The Inquisitions, the pogroms, the Holocaust, forget about it. All the galuts, all the exiles, Babylonian exile, Roman exile. How are we still here studying Torah is anybody's guess. And the answer is, right? Yes.
No, what you're saying, you know who said the same thing? Mark Twain.
Mark Twain.
And he said, the Jew is eternal. He said, the Jew is eternal.
That's right.
He said, everything you took was saying is what he said.
That's right.
He said, the Jew is forever.
That's right.
He also said that the greatest proof that there is a God is the fact that the Jews still exist.
And that after 2,000 years of being in exile, we were somehow able to maintain throughout this time and persecution, we were able to maintain our our connection to this land. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. I want to thank you all for joining us today. It was a great class.
Thank you for the class.
And I want to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.